Good morning. I'm Ken Biberaj, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. In the news today, former President Trump faces the possibility of a second federal indictment, and Meta has announced that it will provide code behind its latest AI technology to developers for free. Today's conversation is recycling the unrecyclable, and we're joined by a dynamic panel. Viji Subramanyam, CFO of Noveon, Noelle, Comolli, Associate Dean, Villanova's College of Engineering, and Dustin Olson, the Ted Lasso of this sector, the CEO of PureCycle. So wonderful to see you all. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Doing well, Ken, thanks.
Well, listen, I think right at the outset, this is a broad topic, and it wasn't until we kind of lined you all up and I really got thinking about this to really understand just the magnitude of what each of you is spending time on in the sector. So we've come up with this title. Why don't we start with you, Viji, and just talk a little bit about Novion, your background, and how you guys play in the sector and what you're focused on, and then we'll go around to everybody and then dive in.
Thank you, Ken. I'm the CFO at Novion, and I work at the 140,000 square foot factory, which is based in San Marcos, Texas. What Novion does is we manufacture neodymium iron boron permanent magnets. And these magnets are used in wide area of applications, starting with electric vehicle motors, wind turbines, MRI machines, hand power tools, name it, magnets go everywhere. And many of these products are fundamental to electrification. We recently closed a Series B funding round, and we raised $75 million. And this is basically to scale our manufacturing capabilities.
Beautiful. Excellent. Noelle, let's go to you.
Sure. So I work in the academic space. In my personal research, I study polymers or plastics, and I look at partnering with companies and different government agencies to study how we can biosource the plastics, so remove ourselves from petroleum, and then how can we kind of recycle some of those unrecyclable, traditionally not recycled plastics. And then on the education side here at Villanova, we focus a lot on teaching the circular economy, as well as making sure every Villanova engineer is a sustainable engineer.
Dustin, I got to tee it up. You guys are the molecular washing machine of the industry, right? Tell us, what are you up to over there at PureCycle?
Yeah, there's a lot of different emerging technologies given the kind of the renewed interest in recycling these days. There's a lot of new technologies coming out, and we're what's called a solvent recycling or solvent purification. But the way to think about it's like a molecular washing machine. Okay, so we take all that plastic and we focus on polypropylene, but polypropylene's everywhere. I mean, it's in carpet, it's in bumpers, it's in food packaging, it's in ag and construction, and you name it, clothing, it's everywhere. And it's really difficult to recycle because it's such a versatile plastic that a lot of companies will add different things to it to make it do what they want it to do, which is great, but that makes it very difficult to recycle. And so what we've got is a really innovative type process, which doesn't just wash the outside of the plastic widget, it washes the inside of the plastic. So we can take the dyes out, the colors out, the odors out, all of the additive packages that we purposely put in there to make it do what we want it to do. We swap it out and bring it back to like a fossil fuel equivalent type plastic, which is cool because that makes the process fully circular. I mean, there is no doubt that we are a plastic to plastic recycler, and that's nice for both consumers and customers because they don't have to change their process to use our plastic. They just do what they've done before, but now with a high quality recycled product as opposed to a fossil based product.
So you just announced a new factory in Ohio. Tell us a little bit about what's happening today with you guys, and also who are your customers? How do you source the plastic you're using? And give us a little bit of a scope of the actual plastics market from a recycling perspective.
Yeah. So I'm actually in Ohio right now. This is our first facility. It's the first commercial scale solvent purification facility in the world, and we're super proud of it. We've scaled the technology up We can make like 110 million pounds per year of product, which sounds like a lot. But if you think in terms of the ecosystem of plastic or polymers in general, there's like 500 billion pounds of plastic produced every year. And that's new plastic mostly new plastic out of fossil fuels. And of that, about 200 billion is polypropylene. So we're doing like 100 million out of the 200 billion. But that's why it's so exciting, because this technology is so cool and so robust that it's going to give us an opportunity to really scale it quickly around the world, which will bring a very high quality product in for customers and consumers to use to make everyday products that we use every day. And we're a technology that was actually born out of Procter & Gamble. They're a strong partner of ours. And about a decade ago, they looked around the room and they said, no one's really doing what we need them to do. And so they've got a big R&D house, and they just invented something, and we partnered with them. We scaled it, they invented it, and now we're running together. And
Love it.
you know, I expect this product to go into lots of everyday things like shampoo bottles and
Sure.
razor handles and car bumpers and carpet and all these things.
So Noelle, I mean, like when I went to college, like I don't think anybody was talking about masters in, circular economy, right? Like talk to us about this, right? Like what is the academic angle? What are you trying to educate young people about in terms of an opportunity for future workforce?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. So we talk a lot more about the world of work, and we try to prepare students to move to work. So we don't want to be this isolated ivory tower in academia anymore. So our undergrads and even our grad students, we try to focus a little more on what can translate right to industry. So we are tackling those big research questions, but how we like to partner with industry and how can we translate it faster. And we're also really looking at this bigger picture of, yeah, we can optimize the process for the most efficient and the lowest cost, but is that the best design? So we're trying to broaden that design criteria and say, is it the best environmental design? Is it the best for society? Is it politically going to work in the area where we're designing it? So we're trying to teach them this kind of whole systems thinking in design up front so that we're not handing Dustin a problem to fix.
I was going to compliment Noelle a bit, Ken, because I think the work that the universities are doing to really grow the sustainability acumen in the students has been really good. Because the students that we get to come to our facilities, like they're super excited to do this type of work, and they've got a level of understanding that's much better than what it was when I started 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah, so they're not ivory towers anymore. They're sustainably recycled produced towers. So
Exactly.
Right.
Really move the needle here. So Viji, I mean, like, as we think about recycling and magnets, right? Like one of the things as I learned more about Novion was like the domestic rare earth supply chain aspect, right? Like, so talk about that, right? Like I have like, 5 of these old iPhones in a drawer that I'm like, I don't know what to do with them anymore. Like, do I save them because maybe one day I need them, or, the first iPhone resold for like, $1 million or something. Like what's happening with like the input of material to recycle and how you guys think about the supply chain?
So what Novion's manufacturing approach is unusual in a couple of ways. And what we do is we create high power magnets from recycled magnet feedstock. So if you look at like if you think about rare earth magnets, they are usually mined, and this raises like significant environmental concerns. But what we do is we recycle these magnets from discarded products like electric scooters, like bird scooters, car components, hard drives, and so what happens is that the magnets that we make are more powerful than the ones we replace. So, and it also uses 90% less energy, and it's also able to create less waste. So for Novion, it's about helping create a circular solution and economies of scale. Secondly, what's happening in this space is that we are the only domestic manufacturers of these magnets. And you might ask, like, why does this matter, right? It's
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, because China produces 90% of the global supply, and these magnets are considered critical to our national security. Because apart from the other applications that I listed, like wind turbines, electric vehicles and stuff, these magnets also go into our weapon systems. And for this reason, the federal government also supports our efforts through the Defense Production Act. And we do have a grant as part of the DPA Title III program.
Interesting.
So
yeah, I find that so fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that lastly, like, the demand for this magnets is expected to triple over the next couple of years, right? Right now, what we are seeing is that less than 1% of the global magnet supply is actually being recycled. But it's projected by like 2030, we would have sufficient end-of-life magnet feedstock that could power like close to like 250 million electric vehicles. So you can see that, this circular economy, like, is you can keep it, operating smoothly because of the availability of these magnets that are, which I said is like just less than 1% of it is being recycled right now.
So all this is just thrown in the garbage, and just no one's really paying attention to it, and something.
Exactly. Yes.
So walk through. I mean, for both, like, the electronic devices, the computers, the hard drives, the bird scooters, as well as like the hard plastics, right? Like, how do you get access to those products, right? Like, how do consumers, like, are they, companies and industry, or are they individuals? Like, just the mechanics of it, right? Like, because you just need to capture more of it to produce and recycle more of it, and then put more of it out into the market, right? Like, you need to meet the demand of, like, you're doing 100 million pounds, Dustin, but there's a 500 billion pound market annually, right? Viji, there's not going to be less electric vehicles, there's going to be dramatically more. And as we kind of cut off our supply chain demands that even Jamie Dimon's highlighted, just how important it is for us domestically, like, how do you meet that? So, like, how do you get access to the products that you need to do what you're doing?
So actually, the Novion was actually built, to prove this viability of the circular economy, right? So, so we have partnership with a couple of companies. Like, we have partnership with Toyota. Like, we take their hybrid, Prius 2, and then we recycle those magnets to be going into the next generation of Priuses. We have partnership with companies that have that want to recycle their hard disk drives. So this is one of the areas, we are doing the partnership with a number of companies to take their components and be able to make
direct from them. Yeah,
exactly.
And Dustin?
I think this is a really important question, because I think in all of these solutions, you have to let technology lead. You can't like push a solution and force it to work. You've got to find the problem and then let the technology solve it. But building the infrastructure to supply these solutions once they're found is going to be critically important. I think most of that happens naturally. Once there's a technology that eclipses kind of the technical problem, then there's going to be a market in order to, like, say, source that business solution. So I think it happens naturally, but it can take a lot longer than what we want it to take. Yeah. I can tell you in the plastic world that the infrastructure side, there was a major leap about 5 to 10 years ago in sortation technology. And we've got everything we need in order to sort and build the infrastructure to really do something of higher value with the waste plastic. So it's there. And a lot of companies are starting to put CapEx into those solutions to get them up and running and going. And we're actually backward integrating a little bit also, so we can capture that feed, make it the way we want it to be, and then purify it to a higher value product. So I do think it's an area where help helps. So support from infrastructure funds or support from government entities or whatever, like, that can really accelerate the infrastructure development process. But at the end of the day, you have to have a technology that proves that what you can do will add value to that stream and to the product. And then it will, I think, also happen naturally.
Yeah. So Noelle, I mean, tied to all this is really like the future workforce, right? I mean, like, so at Savills, we represent companies, and a lot of our, work is around kind of site selection. And honestly, it feels like the real estate itself matters less than anything as it relates to supply chain, access to raw materials, and workforce, more importantly, right? And then it's like, okay, well, we need a site that's this many acres, right? Like, how are we, what are you guys doing? What does academia in general need to do to keep up with this rapid acceleration of innovation to make sure we have the workers who could do what's needed?
Right. So one of the things we talk about now is like your bachelor's degree isn't it. It's you have to be a lifelong learner. Even as an engineer, you come out with what's the leading edge at that time, and 2-3 years later, you're outdated. Right. So I'm constantly hiring new engineers on the faculty that know stuff that didn't exist when I was a student. So we keep saying, you have to continue learning, and we're adapting in that the traditional master's PhD model isn't what people in industry need. They may need 1 or 2 short courses. So we're, like many universities, working on short courses, stackable certificates, things that you can come in as a working professional and keep adding that innovation, that new skill set to wherever things are going.
And Viji, Dustin, how do you guys, practically, as you're siting in Texas and siting in Ohio, how do you think about workforce? And are you getting the people you need? Are you seeing gaps? Like, how's it going for you? Viji, maybe start with you.
Yeah, our challenge as an organization is also to build the magnet manufacturing footprint in America from the ground up. And it doesn't exist right now. And it's the same, 3 years ago, we employed, 30 people, and today our headcount is 71. But we require a wide set of skill set. We require engineers, chemical engineers, process engineers, electrical engineers, but we also require the capabilities around operators, technicians. So a lot of trade skills that are required in the production. And so we've been partnering with our local universities. I'm excited to see Noelle here, hoping at some point we can develop a curriculum. This is one of the areas that we need to develop and build up.
Fascinating. Dustin?
Yeah, look, I think all of those are really good. I think that the stackable certificates and the long time learning and continuous learning, there's no better advice that you could give to a new employee than to continuously learn and train and develop, because you will go stale quickly. However, I find that in our industry, because there's such a desire across the consumer base, and also, let's say, this generation of students, that they want to do something to help the environment.
Yeah.
What I find is that when we start telling any recruit about our story, they get so excited about it that they want to come. We do the same thing that Viji is doing as far as scaling, and we got to have lots of engineers, really smart people that are that can do all the technical work. But the thing that gives us a little bit of extra acceleration or a little extra juice is the passion.
Yeah.
And I find that when people have the opportunity to work in an environment like this, solving problems like this, it's like it just gives them a little bit more motivation to go harder and also be more fulfilled. So I find it's a double win. I mean, we get employees that are just really going, but we also have people that are excited and happy with this type of work they're doing because they feel like they're solving a bigger purpose.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to agree, Dustin,
Yeah.
because we actually find that our students are very mission driven.
Yeah.
And we try to coach them to find a career, not a job. And we find that this generation, that's what they want. They want to work for a company that has a mission and really sticks to it. And then they're passionate about it.
That's great.
And passionate employees
Yeah.
will be so much more successful in their career because they'll do all the extra things naturally because they're so excited about it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Viji, I didn't mean to talk on
But
you.
I also wanted to add, I think similar to what you guys were saying, people don't know that, hey, magnets can be recycled. That's a story that we tell them. And, it's like, with global warming and all that stuff, people want to do, like, they want to recycle, and anything that can be recycled is a big draw for us as well.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So, I mean, I just feel like in the last 10 years, so many young people were focused on kind of Silicon Valley and tech from a kind of like coding perspective and AI perspective, right? It just feels like this narrative of a resurgence in manufacturing, coupled with like this dynamic innovation, coupled with national security issues, supply chain issues, carbon footprint issues, climate issues, sustainability issues, that there is this moment, right? Like, where are we, in your opinion, on this kind of cycle of this resurgence in manufacturing? Are we kind of in the middle, at the very beginning? I mean, it's clearly something that, the White House and at the federal level with the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act, it seems like, every week there's just another story of another innovator, another company, a bigger incentive, a bigger project kind of coming up. It seems like pretty exciting. Like, where are we, Viji? Is this the beginning? Is this, we're just getting started, or what?
I think what the geopolitical environment as well as the supply chain has brought into the forefront is having something here and being manufactured here. And so I think it started a couple of years ago, and the pandemic, I think, accelerated it. And so I think it's somewhere in the middle, and we, people are recognizing it. We're getting a lot of grants. Government is getting involved. And I come from, my several years before I joined Novion in San Marcos, I worked for several years in the semiconductor equipment industry. And if you look at what used to happen in the semiconductor equipment industry, we used to talk about outsourcing, we used to talk about just in time and, merge in transit. Those were some of the buzzwords that were used. Whereas now it's all about redundancy and, having, second sourcing and stuff. So I think it's somewhere in that stage. It's somewhere in the middle juncture, I think.
Interesting. Great.
Can I jump in on this one? Because I would answer it like, I think that we are on the verge of doing something really big and really differential and really good. Okay, because like the world is aligning behind, we need to do something to really make a change. And no greenwashing, no paper washing, none of this stuff. Like, do it for real. And I think the systems are being set to where we can track, manage, and monitor all of that to make sure it's right and real and not, fake news or whatever. Yeah. So I think we're on the verge of doing something very real. But even from a macro perspective, when you get to like domestically focused, whichever domestic it is, it can be US, it can be Europe, it can be Asia, whatever, they're local domestic. When you think about domestically focused, kind of internally focused efforts to add redundancy to the supply chain, if you think about where we were 30 years ago, we would go find petroleum somewhere and we'd make a massive ecosystem around that petroleum to refine it, to build it, to grow it, to make the pellets, and then you ship it around the world. I would think it's probably the same way with mining of magnets. Like, you go find the place where you can get all the stuff to go make the magnets, and then you ship it around the world. What we're doing now with a circular economy is we're disrupting that fundamental supply chain, because now, instead of having petroleum as the source for all incoming feed,
like the moment he was gonna
no.
All right, we'll bear with Dustin for 1 second. Dustin, if you could hear us, you froze for a second. We'll give him, okay. No, why don't you react to where we are and how you think about it, and then Dustin will be back, no doubt.
Sure. So I'll kind of.
Or someone cut him off because he was at that moment where he was going to tell us how someone's listening.
I feel like I'll pick up where he was. I feel like we're getting to the point where we're no longer dependent on petroleum and particular mining sources, and we're not going to have to pull as many raw materials into this cycle, is kind of what he's saying.
Sure.
So picking up on that and Viji's point of like redundancy in the supply chain, like nothing like COVID had happened where before it was globalization, no manufacturer was here. I was telling my students, be prepared to travel internationally. You're definitely going to have to. Now it's come back, right? And I think we're maybe even in the beginning. Like I'm hopeful because like the National Science Foundation just opened a whole new branch called the Technology Innovation Partnerships to try and drive more workforce development, more manufacturing here. So they're putting out huge grants to build partnerships between communities and universities and industry to try and take those newest technologies and move them to industry faster and do it here locally in the US in different areas.
One of the things when we started this whole kind of conversation series was like we wanted to focus kind of on the Venn diagram of where the public sector, private sector, and nonprofit, academic, governmental, like where they all intersect, right? It's like that kind of intersection is where you kind of accomplish the largest impact. And it kind of feels like the circular economy is kind of maturing at a rate where like that is now the center of the diagram, right? So Viji, when you think about like you just coming off the heels of a $75 million raise for expansion or Inflation Reduction Act, Defense Production Act, how do you weigh kind of access to resources to enable you to accelerate what you're doing even faster, right? Like how much of it is it you thinking about the federal government versus private capital and so on?
Yeah, the company was founded 8 years ago, and the founders at that point, they did some white papers and educate. That we had to educate the general public as well as our government legislatures on the importance of having this supply chain, having a domestic manufacturing in the US. Good to see you. Good to see you.
I mean, you're good. You're good.
Thought we would green up this conversation a little bit, so I'm just gonna perch under a tree now. So
it's good to see. Viji can't do that in Texas because it's like 100 degrees.
It's melting out there.
that's true. That's true.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. It just was the contrast.
It's amazing.
So it's a green economy. So the founders, they tapped into the government grants, but as we have developed the technology, we want to accelerate our manufacturing. We want to scale up, and so that was one of the reasons we went into the private markets, and to be able to put the manufacturing capability, expand the capability, bring in the workforce and stuff. So it's a combination of stuff. I think it depends upon what stage of our where we are in terms of our capability, in terms of a production, that determines which funding source we can tap into. But there are a number of areas we've been tapping over the last several years, and the private placement for us was to get some equity in place to accelerate the manufacturing.
Right. No, it doesn't. We're just talking about kind of access to capital, right? Like what you guys are embarking on doing, the magnitude of it is so large, but requires partnership, public, private, et cetera. So we were kind of discussing, where do you see those sources of resources, obviously, whether it's Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, private markets, and what do you kind of seen as a disconnect? We briefly in our prep talk kind of, chatted a little bit about that, right? Like the private markets aren't maybe necessarily ready to invest in a big way yet, right? Like, Novion's coming off of their big raise, you're thinking about growth, like talk to us about access to the capital to accomplish what you're doing.
Yeah, look, I think that everybody has the interest of investing in more ESG focused or green focused type projects. I think in general, there's a lack of quality projects out there that grow the attention of the market to fund naturally. Some of that is because early stage stuff is just inherently more risky. So you've got to do a little bit more work on the front end to get it there so you can de-risk it so that the natural investors can come in without as much, concern. So I do think there's a blend between like public and private funding. I think public is generally more about building the infrastructure and helping to support the early stage companies to get them some escape velocity. And then I think ultimately at the end of the day, the sustainable business that we're creating has got to have sustainable economics also. It cannot be a subsidy driven type business that requires a subsidy to survive. It's got to be able to stand on its own 2 feet to move forward. So I think the idea of early stage seed funding from a public perspective, and maybe also bigger funding from an infrastructure perspective that then creates the business that can be supported from the public markets is kind of the way to go. At the end of the day, people want to invest in ESG, but it's very difficult to get people over the over a higher risk profile or something like that. So you've got to have a good business plan in order to draw that capital in.
Before I go to Noelle, just on the topic of ESG and reporting public markets, right? Like larger companies, how much are you seeing driven by prospective clients of yours related to their supply chain? Like you talk about Procter and Gamble and doing what you're doing, right? Like that's going to have an impact on their reporting from an ESG standpoint in the financial markets, right? Like Viji, like the more batteries you kind of recycle and magnets you can recycle and then repurpose, right? Like talk about that real quick. Like how's the demand from the private sector and the public markets going to kind of shape the next 5-10 years of what you're doing?
Yeah. So
well, go ahead, Viji. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dustin.
Well, only thing I would say is that like I think that the partners that we have found to grow with, to build with, equipment suppliers, construction firms, engineering groups, things like that, like they are very excited to work with us because it helps them fulfill their ESG goals. And so I find that we get, let's say, better than average support across our general ecosystem because of the mission that we have. And some of that is because it's good for their business to show that they've got something like that. The other is it's motivational. So even your suppliers, when they know that they're working for something that's bigger than them, they get excited to work on it. And so they will draw like the best people from their company to want to work on your project because they believe in it. And that's powerful.
That's great.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is similar to what Dustin was saying, whether it's our suppliers, whether it's our customers, or even our investors, and everybody is, we're excited about the fact that, what we make is from recycled sources. So ESG was a big component. In fact, a lot of our customers, automotive customers, want to know how much, because I think they have a directive in their manufacturing or in their products that they make, X percentage or some percentage of it needs to come from recycled sources. So it's a big draw from across, and that's what we're seeing.
And Noelle, how do you think about meeting the demand from a research perspective? Like, where are you prioritizing research and academia, and what are you trying to put out there in terms of content and reports and so on?
Right. So I think our piece in academia is to take the high risk stuff right, that the companies can't do. Sure. And that's kind of where we specialize because it's super expensive and you have to invest a lot of time and money in leads that may not work. Right. And that's kind of where we take it. And then when we get it to the point that it's this could scale, that's kind of when we hand it off usually. So we hand it off to somebody like Dustin or Viji and say, okay, you're the scaling expert. And we try to prioritize those new novel things and kind of holes in the market, So a lot of what we're looking at on the plastic side, especially, is what are the right biosources? So moving away from petroleum is great, but in this whole circular economy approach, looking at the energy and the water inputs, what's the best choices to do that? What's not going to deplete a different community if we go to that source coming in? And then, the ones that are 7, the other plastics that we don't really recycle, how do we start recycling those? The ones that don't have a number on them. So can we engineer bacteria to degrade them? can we, break them down other ways? So we're looking kind of at those unanswered questions to get them to the point to hand them off to scale up.
Engineer
that's
criteria to break down plastic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible, Ken. Like the number of technologies that are emerging to tackle this plastic situation is it's just, look, it's exciting. Like if people aren't more excited about the future of the world today, then they're just not looking in the right places, because there are so many good solutions that are coming to solve these big problems, and we should all be excited about that.
Yeah.
And look, it starts with what Noelle talked about earlier in the conversation, like teaching people how to think about the full sustainability of the product is really important.
Yeah.
And so like they could think about, well, how to recycle that better. They might also think about how to design the package better so it's more recyclable. They might also think about how to partner with somebody to completely shift the way we're doing it so you don't need it anymore. I mean, there's thousands of areas where good work is being done, and it's something to be excited about.
I think one of the things here. Oh, good.
If only we could recycle magnets, we could use like recycled plastic to make magnets. I'm really excited.
Well, we'll leave it up to Noelle to figure out how to achieve it. So
that's a fringe. So Noelle's got to figure out how to combine our two businesses.
There you
Okay,
go.
so that's on you, Noelle.
And I'll
pressure.
have here. I'm coming again.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So just as we kind of wind down here, just like I want to be able to kind of articulate the kind of magnitude of the market. And what I mean by that is, like, you guys are not nonprofits, right? Like, you're sustainably oriented, but you're private sector solutions that are profit driven and finding a way to kind of monetize and generate revenue to do this, to then scale, right? Like, the markets for your respective sectors, whether it's, the plastics, 500 billion produced a year, to, batteries and magnets, like, this is how much is being done in a market that's like this much being produced or there, right? Like, what are the barriers to entry? How do we get more companies and more innovators to get involved with this? And then what's the message in terms of like the revenue, private sector, capitalistic kind of opportunity to do this great, exciting work? Maybe Viji, we'll start with you and then.
Yeah, so the market is huge. The barrier to entry is it's a capital intensive business.
Yeah.
You require workforce, which is, you require like the complex workforce, as well as, like, as I mentioned, the tradesmen. Trade skills that we need, and it's also about the being able to, like you said, like we need to have the capital, like it's something that we are passionate about, but it requires a lot of work. It's like building the infrastructure here, and yeah, so it's a combination of these different things that are barriers at this point.
Perfect. Dustin?
Look, I agree with all of that. I think that at the end of the day, the fundamentals of business will rule on how quickly you can go. Okay, so in the space of recycling, you've got a relatively cheap feedstock, infrastructure challenges, but really the technology's there to eliminate that as a cost risk. And then it's about your technology and whether or not you can scale it to make a premium product. And if you can make a premium product out of a feedstock that's in pretty good, cost profile with a variable cost that's in good shape, then you've got a business that's sustainable. And when it comes to the scale, again, like, we're proving a technology right now. We're more of a tech company right now than we are a recycling company or a plastics company. We're a tech company because we believe that when we get the tech right, there's going to be a whole lot of different countries around the world that are going to want to plop one of these plants down in their region because it helps to create the circular economy inside their space. And we think, but you have to stay focused on the fundamental economics to make sure you're making the right business decisions to drive the growth curve properly.
I'm actually going to steal something that Dustin said. We are recycling, but we're also a tech company. So it's a lot of complex technology that's involved, and so and as Dustin mentioned, like you need to have a viable product. This product needs to be profitable, and that's what draws the manufacturing here.
And Noelle, we're getting into the
but from a I'm sorry, but from
No.
a scale perspective, there is an endless supply of demand. Okay, like everybody wants it. Everybody wants to be able to say that they made their stuff out of something circular. That's the message that they want for all of their consumers. Everybody knows that people around the world want to buy that. Like people care more about it today than they did 20 years ago. So there's like marketing power in that. It's just about creating the supply. So if you get that product that's high quality, if you get the business that's sustainable, the demand will take care of itself.
Amazing. And Noelle, are we getting to the point where, students are going to think less about business school and, that finance, Wall Street job and more about manufacturing and moving to Ohio or the outskirts of Texas to manufacture in America? Like, is this?
I hope so. I think that these are good jobs and these are what the students want, right? They want to work on doing good for the earth, right? They want to do good for humanity, especially our students at Villanova. So that's definitely where they want to go. And I wanted to add in the funding space, like for new people out there with new ideas, like look at NSF and partner with academia. There's a lot of money being pumped into industry academia partnerships because we have the resources in the labs to do that basic research that you may not have.
Interesting. So let's
hiring, please send your students to our factory.
I will be sending them your way.
I was going to add one thing to the idea of where people want to work. I think all of our companies are evolving at the same time with how we work. Okay, the pandemic created all of this kind of new way of working and things like that. And so we're able to take advantage of that a little bit. So where you may not have to live in the middle of somewhere you don't want to live because there's going to be more remote opportunities available, it allows people to have the work-life balance that they desire and also the work, the passion for the work that they want.
That's exciting. Well, look, we're winding down. I think you all know, so I sit in DC. We often have folks in the, policy sector tuning in. Is there just a word of advice or an ask or a request of government, right? Noelle, maybe I'll start with you. Like, what should the government policymakers be thinking about to kind of help academia, private sector, infrastructure for your growth?
I think keep funding these things like the NSF TIP and their art programs where they're creating these collaborations. I think they're a very powerful way to move forward.
Perfect. NSF TIP, I'm going to Google that after we get off. Viji.
I think they should encourage efforts to identify and recover recyclable feedstock for different materials, encourage grant and loan applications. And then maybe also provide research, development, and testing for advanced facets of recycling. So those could be one of the ways that could enable this.
Beautiful. Dustin?
Yeah, look, I think make sure that space is created for new and emerging companies to succeed, because we're not going to have the same lobbying powers that everybody else has got. We're not as established, so we need space to operate and space to go. I think a focus on infrastructure is really important.
Sure.
And I would leave it like that. Let us have space and help us on infrastructure.
Listen, I wasn't skeptical coming in, but this was, to everybody listening, a motivating, inspiring, and indeed exciting conversation. The circular economy is upon us, and what you all are doing is just, it's transformative and it's exciting to learn about. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to chat with us on Coffee with Ken today, and excited for your growth and what's coming next and the future workforce and all that stuff. So really thank you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. And everybody tuning in, you can always visit coffeewithken.com. You can catch us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Google Play if you missed it and you want to just listen to it. We have our 100th episode coming up in August, so stay tuned for more information on that coming up. Until next time, great seeing you, folks.